Let's call ourselves to order. Meeting of the West Newbury Board of Selectmen, Monday, March 29th. It is 7:05. This meeting is being broadcast on local cable TV and recorded for rebroadcast on the local cable channels and on the internet. The meeting is also accessible by remote participation. This is a Zoom meeting. The phone number is 646-558-8656. The meeting ID number is 924-5131-8343, and the passcode is 260917. So a couple of announcements on April 30th and Saturday, March 14th, Saturday, May 1st. The tree committee will be having a virtual Arbor Day celebration. There will be some things you can participate in online, some informational things. It's best to go to the tree committee's website to get details on that. In celebration also of Earth Day, the town has always been having an annual cleanup day, and this year we'll be doing that on Saturday and Sunday, the same weekend, May 1st and 2nd. We'll give you more information about that. The day after that, May 3rd, is the annual town election, which will take place from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. and that's Monday. People always think it's an election, so it's a Tuesday, but the town election is on Monday, May 3rd. The annual and special town meeting will be Saturday, May 22nd. And for announcements, go to westnewbury.org/subscribe. Thank you all for coming. Our first agenda item is an recommendation by Police Chief Durand to appoint Matthew Dixon as a reserve police officer. Jeff?
Yep. Matthew lives in West Newbury. He's a recent graduate of the part-time academy, also from Merrimack College. He has a lot of availability. He's done well on his interviews and his testing. Would like to have him appointed as a reserve officer.
Is Matthew online right now, or?
I emailed with him this morning and gave him instructions. I don't know if he was able to get on.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Well, I would, based on the chief's recommendation, I would move to appoint Matthew Dixon as a reserve police officer.
I will second that.
Are you getting a lot of feedback?
Yeah, that's coming from someone called Denise's iPad. So I don't know. I just muted that, but I'm going to unmute it just on the chance that maybe that's Matthew.
I believe it is Matthew.
Do you want the video?
No, it's fine. I just want to thank you for the opportunity, and I'm really excited to serve my community and join this police department. So thank you.
Great, thanks, Matthew.
Thank you, Matt. So that motion's been, and incidentally, Glenn is not available at the moment. He's having some automobile trouble, so he may be coming in later. So it's just the two of us for the moment. So motion's been seconded. Further discussion? All in favor of the appointment of Matthew Dixon as the reserve police officer? Archibald, aye.
Parker, aye.
Thank you, Matthew, and welcome aboard.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Jeff.
Our next item is, and first of all, thank you for coming. We have Superintendent Lynch and Business Manager Cosmas. I hope I'm pronouncing it right, from Whittier. And thank you for coming. We always enjoy hearing what's going on. It's always very enlightening, and we thank them for taking the time to do so. We know we're the smallest piece in the puzzle at Whittier, but Whittier's always been very nice. And whenever we've asked for information for going way back when I was on the FinCom, Whittier was always very forthcoming and giving us all sorts of information anytime we wanted it. So very appreciative. So without further ado, whichever one of you wants to take the floor and just give us a brief summary of how things are going and how you see the budget for the next year.
Sure. Thank you so much for having us. I actually really wish we were in person because we always enjoy coming to West Newbury. And actually, Ms. Cosmas and I find ways to check out all the restaurants in our 11 communities for dinner. So we're missing out on that. So I think it's important to have an understanding about, this time last year where we were and what we were looking at as a budget, and then, what happened throughout the month of March and April, and where we are now. So I hope you'll allow me to take about 5 minutes to kind of go over all of that. And if there's any questions, feel free to interrupt me. So last year, our required net school spending was up 7.57%. Our Chapter 70 aid was up 11.24%. Our operating budget was up 6.5%. And our assessments to our community was only up 2.27%. So things were really looking pretty good last year in March. And then I say March 12th happened, and that was the last day we saw our students in person for that school year. So reasons for the budget increase were contractual obligations, obviously retirement costs. We're looking to expand our vocational programs at Northern Essex Community College. It's right down the street. They have some available space. So we're looking at moving CAD and engineering over there so our students would have a pathway for college. The Student Opportunity Act, the addition of a vocational administrator to cover the after dark and evening programs. We feel it's really important that in our community that we're not only servicing high school age students, but also our community and providing a workforce. So we have about 350 adult learners in our evening program. And then we were looking at an addition of 4.45 teachers, English language learner, electronics, dental assisting, math, and foreign language. So again, our future plans are to expand access to vocational programming, possible increase in enrollment and potential partnerships with grant opportunities, and then again, expansion of our adult evening programs. I'm happy to say that we have worked with the state on a new program, CTI programs for under-skilled workforce. And we have one going right now in welding, and then one also in advanced manufacturing. And then I say March 12th happened and everything changed. We were told by DESE that we should expect a significant cut in our Chapter 70 funding. As a result, in June, we ripped 10.5 teachers and laid off 15 teaching assistants. 8 tutors were full-time and 7 were part-time. And we also eliminated some 12-month staff. So it was a very difficult end to the school year, as you can imagine. By August 2021, we were able to hire all of the faculty back, except for a March 11th hire, if they were willing to take a change in position. So how we set up our school for academic programming, we had English, math, science, and social studies. And the students stayed in their classroom and the teachers went to them. So there's no movement in our hallways in between classes. So all electives, we figured our electives were a student's vocational area, and we just really wanted to focus on if they were going to be remote or they were going to be hybrid. We wanted to make sure the focus was on the common core areas and also on their vocational technical programming. As you can imagine, it is very difficult to teach vocational programming hybrid and remotely, especially in our trades programs. It's hard, think about it. How do you teach a student carpentry remotely? There's only so many videos that you can do. The students really need to do hands-on. So on September 2nd, we had a reduction of $796,000 in net school spending. But we did receive some COVID grants, which totaled 515,000. So our overall reduction was about 280,000. For the 21-22 school year, we're hoping to bring back our school and put it back together again. We'll reinstate our world language program. We're looking to add financial management, management and entrepreneurship, digital literacy courses, and a small engine appliance course for next year's program of studies. And at this time, we need to continue to offer some fine art offerings, but we're mostly looking at doing that in the after school hours. So Whittier Tech's required net school spending is up 3.18% over last year. Our recommended budget increase is a 2.48% increase. Our chapter 70 aid is up 1.81%. And I'm happy to say our assessment to our communities is up 1.69%. For you in West Newbury, you have one less student than you did last year, which we're disappointed in. We hope to have more students from West Newbury, but that does mean your assessment will go down just a bit for next year. As far as our capital assessment, we need to do some exterior repairs, but we are really looking at an MSBA project. We are in the eligibility stage. We are looking hopefully to June to move to the feasibility stage. And we have already appropriated 1.8 million to the feasibility study for next year without having to borrow from our communities. I know you've heard me and Ms. Cosmas for the last 5 years talking about this project, and we've been really trying to save so that we don't put an undue burden on our 11 cities and towns. So with that, are there any questions?
So tell me about what just the proposed time. What is your thinking about the building project? Just tell me just briefly a little more about that.
It's hard to say. Once the feasibility study comes in, they look at whether we can repair our building and do a renovation, or whether we'd be looking at a new building. It's really premature for me to say what would be looking at. So I don't know. I mean, the problem is, I think we have good bones, but once you start getting into a building that's 50 years old, you start looking at asbestos concerns and those kinds of things. So we want to make sure it's a safe environment for our students and our staff. So
even so far as a change in the site, or no?
It's too premature for me to say.
Okay.
I mean, Whittier Tech owns a lot of land, but a lot of it is swampland. So I don't know if it's buildable. So those are all things that will come out through the feasibility study.
Is the area, the size of the building currently, is it adequate for the program and the population that you have?
Well, that's hard to say. This year, I think we've received over 670 applications, and we only have room for 350 of those 670 applications. So personally, I would love to build a building, if they build it, they will come. But I don't think that's, something fiscally responsible for our communities either. So, as I say, the future will present itself.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it'd be interesting to see what comes out of the feasibility study.
Yes.
Yeah.
You should Maureen, while you have an audience, you should tell people about the process of how students would apply to leaving middle school to go there, but also maybe you want to mention how a little bbit more about the adult programs too, how people would find out about those and apply and so forth.
Sure. Our website, as is a wealth of information. So if anyone's interested in vocational programming, that would be the first place to go. Obviously, give me a call at the school or our guidance department. We have 23 vocational programs, anywhere from engineering, masonry, CAD design, restaurant, culinary, business marketing. So we have a wide range of programs. Unfortunately, this year we've been unable to do the 8th grade tours that we always do. And I think that's just a great opportunity for students to see what's available to them. And unfortunately, we haven't been able to do that, but I do have great relationships with the local superintendents that have allowed us to do interviews. It's, this year has been a different kind of year, so we've had to work through a few different things. As far as our night school program, you can become a journeyman in plumbing and electrical. Those are probably our biggest programs, but we're also looking at getting students or adult students certified in welding, in a welding program. So as you know, there's a real shortage of skilled workforce, and that's what we're trying to do at Whittier. So I hope you know that the money that you're giving to our district is not just being used for school age children, but it's also helping our community and our adult learners as well. So it's if you ever come by Whittier Tech around 8 o'clock at night, we're still moving forward when the building is full. So that's the nice thing.
How many students, say, in plumbing or the electrical journeyman program, how many students do you graduate a year?
Those are our biggest programs, especially electrical this year. I think I have about 45 electrical students this year. We actually had to hire another instructor because we want to make sure safety, we say the money follows the kids. So if we have some programs that are larger than others, we'll lose an instructor in one area and add another in this one. But electrical and plumbing are very popular programs. A program that I wish was a little bit busier is masonry, but let's be honest, that's a pretty tough program dealing with bricks, but there's really great opportunities for our students in those programs. And again, my philosophy is I want to make sure as many doors are open for our kids as possible. So if they want to go right into the trade or if they want to go into college, that's available to them. So we've been very lucky as far as having Northern Essex Community College down the street from us. So we have been approved as an early college program. So our students are gaining credit, almost a year or two of college credit before they even graduate high school, which is a pretty awesome opportunity for them.
Great. Thanks.
Anyone else have any questions? Well, both of you, the town, as we're in budget season now, the town appreciates only an increase in the assessment that's under 2%. We like that. That's good. We love what Whittier does, and just I recommend people go to the website and take advantage of some of these things. Maureen, does anyone say someone that, I don't know, wants to learn about welding? Are most of the people in the evening program, do they do this with actually the idea of a career change, or do they do it for something they just want to learn about?
Well, it's funny. You have different types of programs. Our CTI programs that are run through the state, those are brand new in our state. Those are really for people looking to work in those fields. But, we have our facility director, he teaches at building an Adirondack chair. So there's some, enrichment type of activities that, you can be a part of if you're not really interested. I know my husband participated in the HVAC program just because he was interested in it. He hasn't fixed the air conditioning in our house yet, but he did enjoy the program.
Yeah, years ago, I don't know if you still do, you had a woodworking program, I recall. Yeah.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Nice.
I have taken a few culinary courses. It hasn't helped my culinary skills just yet, but I'll keep trying.
Any
Great.
further questions?
No, thanks a lot.
Thank you for coming. And again, we really enjoy hearing about it, and it's good for you to be able to talk to everybody too.
Yes, and please know, as we move through the building project, we will be as transparent. We've already set up a website for people to be able to view. We'll get that moving as quickly as we can as soon as we get into the next phase, because it's really important that our community know what we're doing and trying to support vocational education in our area.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Thank you. Have a nice night.
Yeah, you too. Bye-bye.
Everybody, have a good evening.
Thank you.
Our next agenda item is a special event application for by the West Newbury Riding and Driving Club for events on July 1st, October 10th, and September 12th. Who's going to be talking about that? Kathy or Deb, or who's going to talk about that?
I can talk about Pipe Stave. Deb can talk about September 12th, which is Adventure Trail.
Okay.
The events on July 11th, not July 1st, and October 10th are our usual Pipe Stave Hill events. We don't know this year what the number of participants is going to be, just because we don't know what's going to happen with state and Board of Health and type of requirements. We're hoping we can run an event like we have in years past, other than in 2020, because it is one of our major fundraisers for our club. We donate funds to local and horse equine charities. And we also do educational events for our members. And maybe later this year, we'll be able to do some social events just for the club. I don't know if you have any questions about this, because I know we've been doing this for 35 years in the town, so I don't know if anybody has any questions, so.
I was not able to attend the Park and Rec Commission meeting this past Thursday. Did they get into this in any detail Thursday night?
I was not, I don't know if anybody from the club attended, because I know I wasn't aware of it, or if it was on their agenda, so I don't know. I know Deb has had some communication with them, so maybe she can talk about that a little bit.
Right. I had a call afterward from Wendy asking me to explain. And again, my particular interest is the Adventure Trail, the September date, because we really need to have exclusive ability to park horse trailers and to use the whole area for Adventure Trail. Adventure Trail, again, similar to what Kathy said, we really can't say how many people will be likely to be there, but last year was an off year and we still had, I think, 60 riders, and they go out at 2-minute intervals pretty much all day. And the issues with parking, with people coming and going from the ball fields, and our inability then to use some of the trails which abut the ball fields has led me to write the letter that I sent to the Parks and Rec and to Angus, requesting that you consider allowing us exclusive use of that area. We only use the area exclusively the 3 times during the year, and there are club members out there picking up sticks and trimming trails and cutting fallen logs, and Adventure Trail is all of the funds that we raise there we give to ECTA, Essex County Trails Association. We've given at least $1,000 a year for 15 years since we've been running this event, and in return, ECTA has underwritten the Coffin Street Bridge, the Chase Street Bridge, They did fill along the river. We are very well served by ECTA, and we really like to make this event fun for the people who participate, and successful in a financial way, so that we can make our contribution to ECTA, and in return, we get a lot of help from them.
I know we had the selectmen, I don't remember exactly, but not too long ago, we had discussed with the Park and Rec whether the issue of the having two events at, excuse me, at the same time on the weekend, on that September weekend, and they were under the impression that everything was copacetic and that there was no issues and that things could happen simultaneously very well. And I had my doubts about that, and they turned out to be true, because you're telling us a different story than what we had heard before, that everything was perfect and that there was no reason to make it an exclusive day for one event or the other. So
I would say that we succeeded in putting it together 2 years in a row, but we were anxious, and the ball sports people were very late in getting together parking stewards. They did hire a police officer to cross people so that they could park cars at Page School. But every time there were families coming down the driveway and horses going across to get to the trail in Dunn's Field, my heart was in my throat. You know, we've been doing real well, but horses are fight or flight animals. And if there's mayhem and ruckus going on, it's hard to predict. And we've got people coming from other towns who are unfamiliar with horses. We can make it work, but I just wanted you to be aware that it's not ideal to have both groups there. We did manage to pull it off 2 years in a row, but we have always had these 3 Sundays as exclusive use of the Riding and Driving Club for decades, and would really prefer to keep it that way.
Yeah, I guess I appreciate what you're saying, Deb, about, so there've been 2 successful years, but I almost feel like, in a way, everybody's dodged a bullet for 2 years. And, I personally, haven't had some exposure to horses in my life, although I avoid them now. But but nonetheless, I've dealt with them enough that I know they're unpredictable and they're big beasts, and there's definitely a significant compatibility potential problem, it would be best for that event, I think, to be an exclusive horse event or exclusive horse event day.
Yeah, the other 2 days, the adventure, the Pipestave Hill horse trial days, they traditionally are not using the fields. They're Sundays in July and over Columbus Day, and so those haven't been a conflict. And this only became a conflict when flag football was added to the ball sports program.
Right. My impression is that it was basically miscommunication, misunderstanding that there was already an event there. And so not necessarily compatible events were scheduled for the same day.
Right.
Yeah.
well, my feeling, I agree completely with Rick. I think the Riding and Driving Club's been doing this for a very long time, and they're not asking too much to have a couple of Sundays to their exclusivity. So that's the way I feel and we were told, we brought this up at a meeting and were told that the Park and Rec had everything under control and that the selectmen did not need to become involved. So that's where it stands at the moment. But our sort of jurisdiction as it is to, if there is some kind of conflict, we're supposed to be the adjudicators, and that's where it's that's what the pipe stave document states. But so at the moment, we don't really have any we don't have any authority, I guess, to step in and make that decision. But I personally, I feel that is the case. I was there. I came over to see how things were going, and it did seem things were okay, but lots of kids going by the trailers and everything else. It did seem like it could be an accident waiting to happen. That's sort of the way I felt. So maybe if we can't get some resolution on this, then the selectmen have to come in and deal with this again. I don't know. Angus, do you have any further comment from what Parks and Rec has said?
Well, like I said, I don't know what came out of Thursday night's meeting. I think the selectmen could act on the special event permits in front of you.
Right.
Aside for the moment, the issue of whether concurrent use would be, allowed or not, then let that play out with Park and Rec. And if they didn't deal with that, it was on the posted agenda for Thursday night, but it was on there in a, more of a general listing of discussion of concurrent use at pipe stave. I don't know I don't know if they had the actual special event permits in front of them. I did email them around to the commission, but it was only maybe a day and a half ahead of the meeting. So I don't know if they, had that kind of formally before them to review those event permits or not, but maybe let that play out, through their next meeting, whenever that is. I suspect that'll be in the next couple of weeks. And then if the outcome is not what the Riding and Driving Club favors, I do agree with what Archie said, which is at that point, if there's a disagreement, then under the Mill Pond Pipe Stave Management Plan, the selectman would be the entity to make that decision ultimately.
Angus, have the ball sports people applied for a facilities use permit for that date?
I don't know, but if they had, I wouldn't necessarily know, because that doesn't come to me right away. I usually get those late in the process.
Okay.
Well, I think in the near term, the easy part is to move and vote on the use of the facility by the Riding and Driving Club. And so, I would move to approve the horse trials on July 11th, the Adventure Trail Day on September 12th, and the horse trials on October 10th at Pipe Stave Hill.
Second. Further discussion? All in favor? Archibald, aye.
And Parker, aye.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Okay, our next item is the presentation of the proposed wetlands bylaw. I see we have some people. We have Bert and members of the Conservation Commission. Who wants to talk first?
Well, I guess what are you looking for? We had a public hearing at our Conservation Commission meeting a couple weeks ago. And I know that you sent some questions questions via Angus, and we sent some responses. So what would you like to hear?
Okay, well, I have some, I just got the comments back this afternoon, so I didn't have much time to go over them, but my first comment is, for example, the article request says that they don't anticipate that there would be any additional costs associated with this article, which I find really, I can't believe that, because there's a tremendous number of, a lot more projects would be affected by this. So I assume there would be a lot more reviews. There's going to be a lot more notification of abutters. The number of abutters for each project is going up. So all of these things add costs. So I think that we have to be forthcoming with the voters on an article that's, even if it's a small increase, but there's certainly an increase in services usually engenders an increase in costs. So that's my first question right off the bat.
Okay, well, let me start with the butter notification, which is paid for by the applicant. So neither the town nor the commission are going to accrue any additional costs or time, because that's done by the applicant. In terms,
But that's the applicant could very well be a resident of the town, and so it's certainly, if they're doing something on their property, it's going to cost them more money.
I assumed that your question was directed at the costs to the town from added cost of administration by the commission. And
Okay.
that will not increase.
That's a valid point. Okay.
In terms of increased number of filings, we don't really know whether there will be a large increase in filings, because it may very well be that while some of the parameters have been extended, many of the projects will still require state filings, and the added review by the agent and the commission will really not be that extensive. And Bert spoke to some agents in communities that have local bylaws, and their response to him, and he can correct me if I'm wrong, was that any increase was minimal.
Okay, excuse me one second. I just want to get the, because we just got them. I just want to find the, here we go. So I have one, again, this is not my area of expertise. I'm just playing, and I don't have a dog in the fight. I'm just playing devil's advocate to find some information as a, basically as a citizen, so that in case other people have similar questions. So one of the item that really stuck out for me was that the dramatic decrease in the time period that would define a vernal pool, and it said that in the existing wetlands, it's 5 months, and the proposed bylaw would decrease the time of coverage by water or ice to 2 months. And my question, again, maybe it's completely naive, but I can think of fields or just anywhere that was covered by some, the ground is frozen, it rains, get some ice there, and it takes a while for that to dry up in the spring. And uh, 2 months seems very short if the state's definition of a vernal pool is actually 5 months. So are we creating an issue that really isn't an issue?
I don't think so. The vernal pool definition requires that there be specific species that use this area. So it's not simply a question of whether there is some ice or some water for any particular period of time. It's not a vernal pool unless it is used by these species for breeding purposes.
So what would be the reason to decrease the time then? If it's species related rather than just presence of water?
Because it may be that species don't need 5 months in order to use it. They have it's mostly in the spring, and they still need that habitat for their breeding purposes.
There were other criteria too. When you certify a vernal pool, it has to meet certain criteria. And you couldn't have just a wet field or a place where there was ice or water at times of the year. It wouldn't meet the other criteria.
And there are some years when the pools might dry faster than other years, but yet they're still viable pools. So having the 5-month time frame might not actually indicate how viable they are as a breeding pool.
Yeah. So what are some of the other criteria, sort of on the ground criteria, in terms of literally what's on the ground underneath where the water would stand in a vernal pool? I picture typically a vernal pool as being in a wooded area and, a lot of leaf debris, typically a lot of leaf debris on the bottom. And are there vernal pools that are field? I mean, I guess I'm trying to picture that.
There are vernal pools in fields.
Yeah. That support typical
Yes.
field plants, grasses.
I think in this town, I think we only have 2, maybe 3 vernal pools that have been certified. That's it. Usually they don't get certified.
But it also has to be a depression. It's not simply a field. It has to hold water and contain at least 200 cubic feet of water at some time during most years.
Yeah.
So it's not simply a little dip, in a field that would qualify as a vernal pool.
And Rick, you do have a point about habitat surrounding the pool. Usually it is wooded.
Yeah.
So that's really what supports the species that breed in the vernal pool in the off season, in the summer.
Right.
In the winter.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks, Molly. That's kind of what I mean, I don't picture a vernal pool as being in an open field.
No.
But by this definition, so you have to find particular species, and
Yes.
Yes.
the burden of proof is on whom in that situation?
The person trying to certify the vernal pool has to find the species.
Well, that's what, yes, but I mean, in other words,
Well, generally, an applicant hires a wetlands specialist to go out and delineate the wetlands and determine what does or doesn't exist on the property. So it would be the wetlands person who would be looking to see whether or not a pool met the definition of a vernal pool.
okay. Another question that I had was related to intermittent creeks. So West Newbury has a lot of swales next to roads. I can think of some. There's one next to my driveway in on Indian Hill Street, and it is wet probably 9 months, 8 months out of the year. Would that be classified actually as a stream?
It is now classified as an intermittent stream under the Wetlands Protection Act regulations.
That's by the state. The state
Okay.
would do that.
Even though it's an artificially created entity.
Yes.
Well, typically
Is it-
artificially created streams are there because there was some kind of stream to begin with. I mean, a lot of farmers just, took advantage of that to provide drainage along the roadways. So it may not necessarily be totally artificial.
And connects to other areas.
So I'm looking at the, it's kind of an interesting, the explanation to the question about intermittent streams or brooks, what are they, and subject to 200 feet of setbacks, not in the WPA. It says such a body of running water which does not flow throughout the year, i.e. which is intermittent as a stream, except for that portion up gradient of all bogs, swamps, wet meadows, and marshes. So if it's an intermittent stream, or if it's an intermittent flow of water, but it's above, a bog, swamp, wet meadow, or marsh, then it's not actually called a stream.
Say that again, Rick.
I'm just looking at the replies that were sent over. I received them this afternoon. I scanned them, but I didn't have a lot of time to look them over. But the sentence reads, such a body of running, I'm just, reading one sentence out of the reply.
Okay.
Such a body of running water which does not flow throughout the year, i.e. which is intermittent, is a stream, except for that portion up gradient of all bogs, swamps, wet meadows, and marshes. To be funny, I'll say, I don't mean to get down into the swamp on this, but it just so I'm just curious. It sounds like there could be a body that flows intermittently, but it isn't considered a stream if it's above. If it's it's the uppermost flow above a bog, a swamp, a wet meadow, or a marsh. That's just an interesting distinction. I'm sorry, I probably shouldn't have gone there. It's just an interesting distinction.
That is the definition in the state regulations.
Okay.
I would just point out one other thing about the intermittent streams. We had a wetlands consultant look at the proposed bylaw, and he made some comments about whether we should include that 200 feet on all intermittent streams. We haven't discussed it as a commission yet, but his suggestion was maybe identify or prioritize intermittent streams that we most want to protect and have the 200 feet associated with that. So I think as a commission, we'll discuss that at our next meeting.
Wendy, are you referring to that? There was a letter in the packet that we received from somebody I don't recall his name, although I've heard it before, but he sounds like a pretty informed person relative to wetlands, and he
is.
He called out the Boxford example. He showed the Boxford's definition. Okay. Yeah.
I think that I still think that 200 feet on something that in a lot of other towns would be catch basins and would be water going, being carried that way, rather than West Newbury doesn't have a lot of curbs, it doesn't have a lot of catch basins. So it seems like these things that would be classified as an intermittent stream, a 200-foot buffer from swales along the roads it's going to really be a detriment to people doing almost anything on their property.
But the 200 foot, let me just clarify, the 200 foot doesn't mean that you can't do anything in that 200 feet. It means that it's an area that is subject to review by the commission to see whether the activities that you are proposing are compatible with protecting the wetlands resource area.
So if someone wants to put up their mailbox, would they have to go to the Conservation Commission because it's within that boundary?
No, I would say no.
But you don't say,
and
you
it's-
didn't say, that
Well,
should be
first,
definitive,
excuse me,
no.
Archie, I think what they would do first is we would send the agent out to look at the area. He would come back and tell us what his opinion was, and then the commission would take it from there. A mailbox near a culvert, unless they're going to fill in the culvert, I really don't think that would be an issue.
But I tried to pick the most minimal thing I could think of, and that would still engender approval from the Conservation Commission. That seems very overkill. It's not a good way to phrase it, but if you think of how many of these swales along the side of the road there are in West Newbury, this is really, and calling them intermittent streams with a 200-foot buffer, that's really that's going to make an incredible amount of work for you people, and it's going to inconvenience a lot of homeowners.
You know, if you're talking about putting a mailbox near the stream, that would fall within the jurisdiction now under state regulations.
But I don't think people have been aware that the drainage from the road is considered a stream.
A lot of those channels, Archie, are actually wetlands from having water in them for so long. You know, they've developed hydric soils, and so they're already regulated 100 feet from them. And you see all up and down Ash Street, the flags all along those channels. All those applicants for the new houses their consultants have delineated those as wetlands, and they're already being regulated as such. So perhaps the difference is the extra 100 feet for an intermittent stream, you know, versus just 100 feet for a wetland resource area.
Yeah, and I would just reiterate what Wendy was saying about Greg Hockman's letter, and you know, maybe identifying the more important intermittent streams in town and seeing if those maybe required a 200-foot buffer.
Well, it's interesting. It never occurred to me that, you know, Archie, having brought up the example of a mailbox, perhaps I was naive, but it never occurred to me that, you know, I live on Crane Neck Street, and any house on Crane Neck Street might then to put in a new mailbox might have to have the Conservation Commission consider.
Well, I think it would depend. If you are simply replacing something that it requires some kind of proposed alteration.
Yeah.
So if you're pulling out a pole from a hole that you have there and sticking a new pole in to put on new mailbox, that's not something that is going to be a regulated activity. It's if you're changing things.
Yeah.
Okay, I think I think I've beat this one to death enough.
Well, I think your point's understood, Archie. I think, we do want to discuss this more at the commission meeting. So,
So, other than the consultant that we can't remember the individual's name and my comments, did you receive any other comments at the hearing? We had a simultaneous meeting. That's why I didn't attend, but
There were some people and they were supportive of the concept of the wetlands bylaw. They thought it was overdue.
no one had any comments about one single item?
no, there were two
No.
people there that spoke and they were very positive about the bylaw. And we haven't received any negative comments.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, speaking for myself, I don't in general have a problem with it, with the changes here, because I think it's important to protect the resource. I just, using that example, the mailbox, it had never occurred to me that something like that could conceivably be regulated, but silly me. Yeah, I mean, wetlands are.
We have to think of, I'm not trying to be difficult. I'm
Yeah,
trying
no, that
to
was a
think,
legitimate point, Archie.
I'm trying to think outside the box.
Yeah.
And our job as selectmen is to think of the good of the entire town. You're concerned about the protecting the wetlands, which I appreciate, but we have other constituencies also, and we have to make sure that everybody's viewpoint is heard and thought, whereas you're coming at it from one angle. I'm trying to come up with things that other people might have issues with. I don't necessarily, it's not my thing. I'm just trying to be the devil's advocate for anyone else in the town. So you have to know where I'm coming from. So
Sure, that's fine. And you should, but I think we also need to think about the values of wetlands, and the lands that border them are valuable to the entire community as well. So
I agree with
it's-
that, but this intermittent stream thing along the sides of roads, I think is a hidden, has some hidden problems to it that haven't been fully thought through. So what about if someone needs to, say someone has a gravel driveway and now they want to, and it has a culvert under it, and now they want to pave it and maybe put some granite stones where the gravel was. Well, that would certainly engender review by conservation by this definition.
It does now anyway.
But have you ever done one?
Yes.
all of the driveway crossings that you see have been permitted.
The new ones, but what about existing ones that like I say, someone wants to change their driveway?
We've been doing the driveways for years, Archie. That is, if there's a culvert there, it just comes before us, and that it's just something we've always done.
Under state
Years
regulation.
and years.
Okay. I didn't know that. Okay, that's okay.
Yeah.
Anyone else have any further comments?
I'm good. That was, I learned a little.
Okay. Thank you all for the work that you put in for doing this, and certainly I know it took a lot of work. So Angus, are we good?
I think so, yeah. So is it correct the commission would have another hearing session at your meeting next Monday? Is that right?
This would be on the agenda.
It'll be on the agenda.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
So it's not actually, Dawn, what's on next Monday's agenda is not a public hearing?
It's just, no, it's a discussion.
Oh, okay.
I mean, it'll be on the agenda as a
Anyone
discussion
can-
item.
Yeah. It's an open meeting.
Yeah, okay, great.
Well,
Thanks.
thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, have a good night. Thanks a lot.
You too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all for coming. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Our next item is a discussion of designation of the Board of Selectmen, changing the designation of the Board of Selectmen to Select Board and initiating the process to formalize the change. So we've been informed that as the Board of Selectmen is actually the terminology used in the legislation, actually, for example, in the town manager legislation, that we would have to formally change that designation through an act that ultimately was passed by the legislature. But in the interim, as an act of policy, I would make a motion that we simply refer to it as the Select Board, and ultimately get the process underway to change it through an act that will have to be passed by the legislature.
Archie, Mike provided some wording.
Right.
Do you think we should use that exact wording?
Yes, do it.
Okay, all right. I move that in accordance with the powers set forth in section 4C of chapter 97 of the Acts of 2017, that it be the policy of the town to use the following terms in connection with this board. The Board of Selectmen shall be referred to as the Select Board. A member of the Select Board shall be referred to as a Select Board member. And since the Town Manager Act already refers to a chairperson, which is section 4B, shall annually elect a chairperson, that aspect is already addressed. So I guess that's the motion.
A second. Discussion?
Just to clarify or to elaborate on what you said about Mike's memo, he's basically advising that, like you said, Archie, as a matter of policy, the board could vote this change tonight, but he's recommending that on any official documents, such as a deed, a bond, or a town warrant, that unless and until the legislation is changed, that the something like a town meeting warrant would continue to say Board of Selectmen.
Right. Thanks for clarifying that, Angus.
I'm just envisioning all the calls we'll get when people see the posted warrant and
Right.
the Board of Selectmen.
Right. Yeah, no, from a legal standpoint, it still needs to be Board of Selectmen, but from a, more conversational or other, non-legal document standpoint, it can be Select Board.
Further discussion?
So Mike, what would be the sequence if the town, assuming the board votes this tonight, and if they did want to initiate a process with the legislature, would that be something that the board would initiate and it would go to the legislature and then ultimately back to town meeting, or would it go to town meeting first, or does it matter?
No, it matters. It has to be first, town meeting would have to authorize the Board of Selectmen to propose this change as a home rule petition under the home rule petition process. And then from there, the selectmen or the select board would then, send in a proposed draft legislation to the legislature. And as this has been done by many other communities, I wouldn't expect that there'd be much resistance to adopting it.
Mike, if there are other adjustments that we wanted to make in the Town Manager Act, would it make sense to try to, assuming they're not too complex, would it make sense to try to include those in the same change?
But certainly it's your home rule. It's your home rule petition, so it can include whatever terms you want. Obviously, that would be a housekeeping term. If we had other housekeeping terminology that we felt was important, again, I wouldn't envision that there'd be much resistance, because with home rule petitions, I mean, basically it's what the community wants for its governance, and the legislature doesn't have a problem with it. But yeah, if this would be an opportunity, it would make more sense to try to do as much as you can. Although other communities have simply just done this. But yeah, I mean, neither way is wrong.
Yeah. Okay.
That's what I was wondering, Mike. Would we sort of be a municipal pest if we're coming back to them for additional things, or is it better to lump it all together? Yeah.
There are so many home rule petitions that just constant. So I don't think that you're doing one or two or three would make any difference to the legislature, other than the fact is that there's no particular urgency on their part to pass them, but they pass relatively smoothly.
Okay. So theoretically, could we make a 2-sentence warrant article and do it soon? Could we do?
You should have the actual petition as approved by town meeting, meaning what you actually are intending to send.
Oh, okay.
So that's along the lines of that Lexington model that you provide. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Well, that's something. Well, we can work on that.
Right.
And maybe that's something we can look at for the special town meeting in the fall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay.
Good. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any more discussion? All in favor? Archibald, aye.
Parker, aye.
Okay, so we can do things like change the letterhead, make the website updated. We can make some of those changes, pretty much right away. So we'll go ahead and start working on that.
Great. Thanks.
Next one is recent change in Massachusetts election law. Mike, that's your bailiwick.
All right. So last year, when they passed the emergency COVID legislation, they granted a number of changes to town elections and powers, and we actually employed them. We moved the date of the town election to June, what was it, 1st last year, or June 3rd, I should say, from its May date. And we had, early voting by mail. Anyone could do it. And so the legislation was to expire on March 31st. On, what was it, just recently, the legislature and the governor signed a new bill extending all those COVID special legislations until June 30th. So the town could, if it desired, move the scheduled May 3rd election to another date prior to June 30th. It is now, we're going to have, usually we just have absentee ballot, which is only available to someone who's not going to be available to vote in town. But now we have early voting, which is applicable to anyone. So anyone can apply for early voting by mail. We have the application on the town website under the town clerk's page. I have paper applications that are in the vestibule in case someone wants to pick that up. They can mail me the application. They can drop the application off in the tax payment box in the vestibule, which is open 24/7, or they can actually sign it, the application, scan it, and email it to the town clerk at wnewbury.org. And then we will mail them an early ballot, which they would have to get us the application for an early voting ballot by mail by the Tuesday before the election. I believe it's the 27th, by 4:30, and then the actual ballot would have to be returned to the town clerk by 8 o'clock on election day, on May 3rd. So that's pretty much, what we have. My recommendations are that we don't change the date of the election. One of the reasons that we changed it was that a lot of my election workers were reluctant to participate. I was very fortunate to get a couple of college students who worked all day to make sure that we had a full election, which we did last year. But since many of them now have fully vaccinated from COVID, and I've been able to recruit them, so they have no problem. We'll still, put in social distancing. We'll put separation of booths. We'll have PPE there. We'll request people when they come into the voting to still wear their masks and the like. But I see no reason why we can't, continue to have the election date on the date that it's originally scheduled. So that's my recommendation.
Okay. Anyone have any comments?
Sorry, I had muted myself. Mike, what are the hours on?
The election date is like the usually hours are from 7 in the morning till 8 at night.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
So there's no action that's needed. I mean,
Right.
Unless you're going to move the, the election date, there's no action needed by the Board of Selectmen. We're already, participating for the early voting by mail, and we're ready to take care of that.
The select board.
The select board.
It's going to take a little getting used to.
Okay. Angus, you're more familiar with the next item of changes to the tax collections policy. Can you fill us in on that?
Yes, so this is one of the policies that came out of the work that the board had done with the Mass Department of Revenue Division of Local Services. And we had brought forward a tax enforcement policy for adoption earlier this year, which really basically enumerates a lot of what state statute requires anyway, but it's kind of handy and nice to have it all in one place and stepwise. The one thing that we left out of the policy that was voted back in February was the section on tax title payment agreements. We weren't aware at that point or hadn't made the connection of whether the town had opted into that statute. Mass General Law, Chapter 60, Section 62A. It turns out the town meeting did approve that statute in the fall of 2018. So I was brand new back then. And so anyhow, that's on the books here in West Newbury. So the recommendation before you is to now amend that tax enforcement policy to build in that new Section F outlining tax title payment agreements. The language that you have in front of you is largely from the recommended policy that came from Department of Revenue. However, we did add in some local language, such as regarding the Elliott Fund. And the section that's highlighted is really the one, unless you have questions on the bigger picture, is really the one thing that at a staff level we wanted to highlight as a policy question, which the template, from Mass DOR reads that for taxpayers that fully comply with their payment agreements, the treasurer collector will waive 50% of the interest accrued on their tax title accounts. And we highlighted that to say, do you want it 50? Do you want it up to 50? Do you want it some number other than 50? And basically it's important to understand that for some of these tax title properties, the interest owed could get into the thousands of dollars. So waiving 50% could end up being a significant, benefit. I do think for people typically people who enter the tax payment agreements, there's typically some financial hardship. So, some amount of relief is, I think, appropriate. I just wanted to highlight that as a policy question. And I think that the up to, I have mixed feelings about, because on the one hand, I think it's always nice to have some flexibility in a policy like this. On the other hand, if that becomes a subjective decision that the treasurer collector has to make, it puts that individual in a difficult position potentially of having to make a judgment call to whether to waive 50% of the interest or some lesser amount. So I actually think it would be better if the board just set the policy of what you think it ought to be, and then the treasurer collector, the staff person, just holds the line on that policy rather than having to make a judgment call or to pick who's going to get what percentage, waiver of interest.
Yeah,
you don't want to have the up to.
Right, I agree with that. I wanted to put it in for discussion, but I don't recommend it.
Yeah, I agree with you, Angus. I don't think it makes sense to make it a subjective call. And if I remember right, the interest rate is the legal interest rate that has to be used is 12%. Is that right?
Actually, once it goes to tax title, I believe it goes to 14%.
Yeah. So if effectively it's approximately half that, or exactly half that, that's still in today's world. That's a pretty high interest rate. Yeah.
So Angus, where is the
bottom of page 62 of your packet?
Oh, just that little highlighted spot. Okay.
Yeah, the whole section is proposed for addition, but that's the one where, it felt like there was a real, a policy question that I didn't want to presume to, know what the board's will would be. The state template does say we'll waive 50%, but as you know, Archie, from a couple of years ago and looking at these, they put it in brackets, anything that they, they're not saying, the state's not saying it needs to be 50% or even that it should be, but that is what they put in as a starting point. And we can either adopt that or something different than that.
I speaking for myself, I'm good with waiving 50%.
I am too. My only comment is has anyone thought of the ramifications? So in other words, is there some kind of a scenario where it would be in the person's best interest to, well, I'm going to wait a couple more months and then and not pay. In other words, I owe $2,000 in interest. And if I wait a couple months, I'll owe $2,500 in interest, but then I'll comply and they'll cut it in half. So I'll only pay $1,250 rather than $2,000. In other words, is there a scenario that if you waited out a little bit longer, you'd get your interest cut in half?
Well, as you know, there's some fees. First of all, the interest is going to continue to accrue, but once it goes into tax title, those fees and the cost to publish the newspaper notice.
That's true. Okay.
It's all going to be added to your account, and no one wants that. I mean, I've been through this a number of times. It's a really tough process for everybody involved, and no homeowner wants their name in the paper and posted in town offices as being in tax title. I don't think anybody would make a financial, to save a couple of $100 would choose to have that happen. Typically, the properties that fall into tax title, there really is some hardship involved.
I was just throwing it out there. Okay.
Yeah, no, it's actually, I mean, I'm not telling you that could never happen.
Okay.
Actually, that's why it went to 14%, because in the 80s, all the developers would never pay any taxes because the tax rate was like 4% for that, and their borrowing costs were 8 or 9%. So every developer wouldn't pay their taxes until they were actually selling the house. And so, it was a lot of money to the cities and towns.
I get you. Yeah. Okay.
So they made it, at a rate that would make people pay.
Okay.
So what happens, so the wording here says for taxpayers that fully comply with their payment agreements, the treasurer collector will waive 50% of the interest accrued on their tax title accounts. What happens if they have complied and then they fall off the wagon?
Well, at that point, once they fully complied, then they've paid their taxes and they're current, so they've taken the property out of tax title. They could then, with the next quarterly bill, start to fall behind again. But until it's gone through the notice and the passage of time, it wouldn't get back into tax title.
I guess what I meant. Okay, actually, I guess I understand.
They got to be paid up everything except the last bit of interest, I would say, Rick.
Yeah. Well, it says the payment agreement. So
right.
I think what you can do is, the payment agreement could be a payment over time, correct? It could.
Yeah, that's exactly how it's set up. Yeah.
But if you miss one of those, then you default back to the.
That's right. If you miss even a single payment, you're out of it.
Okay.
So yeah, typically, let's say just for discussion, the term of the agreement is 2 years. The treasurer collector will calculate what's going to be the amount due at the end of 2 years, including the interest that will accrue, including the fees that will be added along the way, and build that into the monthly payment amount. And the property owner will pay that amount every month. And if they're late on even a single payment, they've defaulted on the deal. Okay. At that point, the town could foreclose and take title to the property.
Okay. So it's not clear to me at this point, is this something that we adopt, that the Board of Selectmen adopt, or is this adopted by town meeting?
Board of Selectmen, because town meeting already adopted the legislation to authorize tax agreements.
Okay,
So this is just, spelling that out in more detail. So just as the board has adopted the other financial policies.
okay. So in a motion here, what needs to be done is we modify in part E the interest rate based on that last line. And then we also adopt part F on redemption or foreclosure.
That's already in there. That's just renumbering that. F is already in the approved policy.
Okay,
So it's just that language in red line. That's the addition of section E.
yeah, okay,
Getting rid of up to, so that would just read 50%.
okay, all right. So, I move then that in what's shown as part E, tax title payment agreements in the tax enforcement policy, that the last line in part E change to read, for taxpayers that fully comply with their payment agreements, the treasurer collector will waive 50% of the interest accrued on their tax title accounts.
Second, all in favor, Archibald, aye.
Parker, aye.
Thank you.
Our next item, it's come up in some negotiations on another contract, but we'd like to perhaps revise the bereavement leave policy for all town employees. This is section 5.4 of the personnel policy. How do you want to go from here, Angus?
So as you know, under the personnel policy tonight, you wouldn't be voting any change.
Right.
You would be giving direction on what change you would like considered at a public hearing, which would then be posted in accordance with the personnel bylaw for all employees to review. So that could be for, let's say, the next, as long as we can get the notice posted in the next couple of days, that could be for the next board meeting in 2 weeks. And then that would be the hearing at which you would vote it or not, depending on. So really the question is, assuming you do want to go forward with some changes to the bereavement leave, the question is, do you like, what I put in with the memo, which would be a really simple change, which would simply add to the definition of eligibility for bereavement leave, grandparent, grandchild, step-parent, step-sibling, and stepchild? Or do you want to look at something that's a bigger rewrite of that section, more along the lines of the sample that I included from a different town?
My inclination would be as simple as possible right now, because we're talking about doing a more general review of the personnel bylaw. And it would be better to be really simple now, to add the additional, additional people for which bereavement leave would be granted, the additional family members, and then at a later time, do more substantial revision around bereavement leave as we do other changes, which obviously we need to get focused on that. Yeah.
I kind of like doing this simple at the moment too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. What about one thing I didn't include in there would be like any kind of in-laws. Right now that's not covered by the policy, and under the language I put in front of you, it also would not be covered.
Yeah, no, I noticed that. I forgot about that, Angus. And I think the in-laws should definitely be in there. I mean, I looked at that and I wondered if maybe that was almost intentional in that, your in-laws arguably are your parents at that point, or your parents-in-law, or can be referred to as parents, but I guess we should be more specific. So there's no ambiguity. What do you think, Archie?
You're losing me.
Okay, well, in the way that the proposed wording in the memo that Angus sent, it added grandparent, grandchild, step parent, step.
Right, I got that. Okay.
But it didn't mention anything about in-laws. But in the other model from another community that Angus showed us, it includes parents-in-law. Where is that?
Yep.
Yeah, I see that. Yeah. Part F. Yeah.
I mean, actually, there's a grouping there, step parents, parents-in-law, step siblings.
We do have step sibling and step parent in the revised language. So, and remember, you're not voting tonight, it would be at a hearing, let's say 2
Right.
weeks from tonight. So if you,
So we can clean it up between now and then.
yeah. So it's really a matter of what do we post for employee review, whether to include those, categories or not.
So my question would be, is that you want to include parents-in-law, and what about brother-in-law and sister-in-law?
I would think yes.
Okay.
I mean, you can't,
And one of the things I kind of like about the other sample I put in there is it includes a list, but then it also has language that allows for some discretion for someone who's not technically on the list, but with whom you have a closer special relationship. So, but that's a bigger change. One of the other things that's just worth noting is the other sample was from where the town manager was the entity that approved that or not, whereas the current policy refers to the department manager. So that gets to one of the consistent issues we have with the whole form of government is if it's subjective and if there's different people, namely department manager, making the decision, then you can have different employees who have different outcomes based on who's their direct manager, as opposed to a town manager form of government where every employee can expect consistency of administration, which right now we do not have.
Yeah.
Angus, do you want to be put in that? Do you want to have to deal with that?
I dealt with it I dealt with it in my last job. That is the job of a town manager, to deal with those things. One of the things that makes my job messy is that.
So let's put town manager to any employee on first line.
Personally, I think that's better because then it's consistent. It could change when the manager changes, but at least, everyone's got the same conditions of employment, at least on that one
Okay.
topic.
Yeah. Okay.
Don't say I didn't warn you. Okay, so I would make so my recommendation, this is for the to be posted so it can be reviewed, to make granted by the town manager, and then at the finally we, in one of the spots there, we put parents-in-law, and I'm good with that.
And how about brother-in-law, sister-in-law?
I don't know. I have to think about that one. Convince me. I mean, people have vacation time, people have personal days. I mean, people do have other ways of taking time off too.
Yeah. Yeah, and I guess everybody's relationship is different. I think of fairly close family contact with with a sibling-in-law. But
someone give me more. I'll whatever. I don't know. We have to draw the line somewhere. That's all.
Yeah.
Because I told you I'm not doing cousins.
You got me. I agree with you there.
Can I put my 2 cents in here?
Yeah.
I think on the issue of sister and brother-in-law, I think the issue is more support for your spouse than it is necessarily your relationship with that particular individual. I think when you have a bereavement, there's a certain amount of spousal support that's really important. And I would think that would be the basis of having parents-in-law as part of that as well. But sisters and brothers-in-law can be very important people to your spouse. You know, your spouse's sisters and brothers are very important to them. And, you know, if there's a question of having to participate in family get-togethers or whatever, or maybe having to travel, it is an important thing that you would do.
Okay.
You want to think on it for a couple of weeks, Archie? I mean, we don't have to. We could put this.
No, you can put it in. What? Okay.
I think it's a good rationale, though, Casey. I mean, I agree. I guess that's part of where I was coming from, although I definitely didn't express it.
I think, you know, one of the downsides I see of kind of the combination of the current language and, you know, potentially broadening it too much is that, unlike the other sample in the packet, which refers to up to 3 days, our current policy simply says 3 days of pay will be granted. So I think that's where, if it gets to be too inclusive, and if each incident is 3 days with pay, and keeping in mind, you know, we have a lot of, basically, I would say just about all of our departments are staffed at a pretty much a subsistence level. So, you know, when time is off, you know, work doesn't get done, and people do notice, you know, that. So that's where I think, you know, I kind of like the other sample where it has up to 3 days, and that way, you know, the manager talks with the employee and, oh, where are the services? It's more of a reasonableness thing, and instead of like entitlement, which is a 3 days absolute, and the language in the other, which allows for, you know, for other family members not to find this immediate family, may grant 1 day of paid bereavement leave. So that way, if it's an in-law situation or something else, just someone who's just very close to your family or non-family, you know, there's still an avenue for the manager to approve that, but it's more discretionary. So, you know, these things are tough. It's there's not a right answer, but you know, what we could do is advertise it with whatever language comes out tonight, and then you'll have time leading up to the hearing where you could finalize that, and also obviously probably get some amount of comments from you know, personnel who will have probably ideas as to what's the right way to go.
Well, Angus, you didn't mention that before, but again, that's making you the subject of more discretion, which is fine with me, but you want to do that.
I mean, that's a complicated, in general, yes. I mean, the problem is right now, you know, it's in some areas, the position has authority, in many others it doesn't. So it's kind of a mixed bag. You know, I think it works a lot better if it's, you know, if your manager is your manager, and on any issue, because then you build a rapport and you build a relationship, and people understand one another. Whereas right now it's kind of some levels of oversight.
All over I know, yeah.
So it's mixed. So it's but that is the job. So I don't mind doing it because that is the job.
Rick, what do you think? Do you want to make that a will or an up to?
I'm trying to think a hard number is, you know, yeah, I'm better with it being just a hard number.
Okay. I kind of think, Angus, you don't need the aggravation of, well, you gave 2 days to that person, don't go there. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. So we're gonna put town manager and add parents-in-law and brother and sister-in-law.
Yeah.
Okay.
Great. Okay, we'll post that, and I think we'll be able to get that on for the next meeting in 2 weeks.
It doesn't have to be 10, is it 10 business days or 10 days?
What is it? At least 10 days. Mike, have you had to interpret that before? Do you know if it's 10 days or 10 business days?
Well, under when dealing with state permits and stuff, when it's 10 days, it's always been referred to as business days.
Okay, so maybe to be on the safe side, we ought to push it to the April 26th.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, that's good. Updates on town, special annual and special town meeting warrant articles. Anything we need to really discuss there? I don't think.
It's mostly informational. The one thing I did want to just point out was the 85,000. I reviewed that with the town accountant and Stephanie. She's actually on the line now, but we both agree that could be removed from the warrant because it was the amount voted last June hasn't been touched and didn't have a sunset date. So that will cover us for any debt service incurred in FY22, if any. I mean, at this point, I wouldn't anticipate that we may even have debt service in FY22 because the first bill wouldn't come due until a year after the debt is issued. And I think it's improbable that we'll issue debt by the end of June. So anyhow, bottom line, I think we can withdraw Article 15 and just take it off that annual town meeting draft warrant.
So where is that money? Where was it appropriated from?
From the CPC historical.
Okay. And so it's still there.
It's still there, but what happens is once town meeting authorizes funding, on the accounting side, that's then moved over into a separate account that Stephanie sets up for every article. So it no longer appears as available in the CPC historical balance to make sure that those dollars aren't spent twice.
So one thing just on the topic of that whole idea is that when with things that are happening in the economy now, it may be that we do sort of want to get the ball rolling in terms of issuing a bond because almost everyone predicts now that there is going to be some modicum of inflation and that interest rates are going to rise. So maybe waiting a year to issue bonds may not be in the town in the short term maybe, but in the town's long-term best interest, it may not be such a good idea for us to keep waiting. Maybe we want to get on that. Yeah.
Well, I hear what you're saying, but I'm definitely not talking about waiting a year. I think it's just until the project is fully designed, fully permitted, goes out to bid and gets bids back. We don't know what the cost is going to be. And in fact,
that's a good
cost until it's actually built. In fact, a lot of kind of borrowing advice is to not actually borrow on a long-term basis until you've actually closed out the project, because that's when you really know what it costs.
Really?
Otherwise, well, so it's recommended to do short-term borrowing like bands, to get your construction financing and then do your permanent loan once the project's done, because then you know what the true cost is. And I'm not necessarily suggesting we would do that here, but we would, in my opinion, we would at least certainly want the project fully designed and permitted, which, knock on wood, with planning board next week, hopefully that'll close and we'll know what any permit conditions are. But then put out to bid, get the bids back. Because if, let's say, the bids come back above budget, that would initiate a period of deciding what to do. And if we've already borrowed the money, then we have to, under federal law or tax law, we have to spend it. We have to start spending it within 3 years. And so we don't want to borrow that money until we know, we have a project.
Okay.
The other thing is, Angus, that there's the bond anticipation note for the water tank, right? And we were planning to roll these together in a single.
Correct.
Plan. When does that the ban expire?
So those expire in July.
Yeah.
The water bans expire in July. And so I've given the numbers to Mike Goutet to build into his FY22 budget to pay the interest on those bans when that comes due in July. And I've told him that I expect that we're going to need to issue more bans in July to carry that forward. The timing's off just by a couple of months with the soldier sales. Anyhow, we are where we are. We can't redo it.
Okay.
But my thinking has been that we would issue roll forward the water bans in July. Let's say we are ready to borrow on the soldiers and sailors in, let's say it could even be August. You could issue bans for that project, and then when both of those mature next spring or early summer, you would then roll those together into long-term borrowing for both projects.
Okay. And hope that interest rates don't change.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing you could do is, instead of doing year bans, you could do 6-month bans.
Yeah. Yeah.
I will say it's a lot of work to do this borrowing, though. Like, it's dozens of hours of time in my office, so it's not something we want to just do casually. Yeah. But if there's money to be saved, that's great. But it does end up, being a capacity issue, because it does, for periods of time, it does take a pretty intensive amount of effort.
Well, I guess, we'll have to look at it 2 months or 3 months from now and see where things are, how progress is. No?
Right. Well, and that's just about the lead time. Probably 3 months is just about the lead time that we would need to give to actually borrow. Is, if we were going to borrow for the, by July 17th, which is when the water bans mature, we would need to be initiating that in the next couple of weeks in order to be in a position to close that loan by July 17th.
Oh, okay.
So that's why I think I just don't see a scenario where we're borrowing for the soldiers and sailors on that time frame.
Yeah. Okay.
Because even if we do happen to be ready by July 17th, let's say it's gone out to bid and we've got construction bids back with the budget, we're not going to know that in 2 weeks.
Yeah. I understand. Okay. Thanks.
So if you're, comfortable with that, we'll go ahead and remove Article 15 from the draft warrant.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
Anything else on the update on the warrant articles?
Yes, I have a question. I have prepared a list of articles that I feel would be amenable to be putting on a consent agenda. And I didn't know if you wanted to discuss this at the meeting or if you wanted to have some sort of another forum to talk about that.
I would say, Casey, why don't you give us those, and then we'll, we haven't obviously had a chance to look at them, but yeah, present them now and Angus will have them, and we can we can go over it at our next meeting, but if you have it, yeah, go ahead.
Do you want a rationale or just numbers?
No, just the numbers, I think, yeah.
Okay.
You say numbers, you say the numbers of the articles, is that what we're gonna
Is that what you mean? Yeah.
That's what I mean. These are articles that I went over both of the warrants and selected a set of articles that I didn't feel would necessarily generate much discussion. I could be wrong, obviously, but that was the rationale that, so, and of course, I think last time I mentioned that if one person wants to have something removed from the consent agenda so that it goes back on the regular warrant, that happens. Turns out that sort of depends on the town. And also whether you have an open town meeting or a special town meeting. So I'm going to have to do a little bit more sleuthing around about that. I've got one town has 7 people have to object, and then another town has 1. So it's kind of all over the place. But
Casey, are those in their, where are those rules? Are they in their town bylaws, or where are they?
no, there really aren't any hard and fast rules for this. It's a type of emotion. So I can't point you to a section of town meeting time or Robert's rules or anything else like that that outlines, specific procedures that you have to do it this way. There's more than one way to skin this particular cat. But
Okay.
basically, the fundamental idea is just that you're taking several articles, lumping them together into one motion, which covers all of the articles. And there's no discussion on the individual articles. It's just a single vote passes all of those, all of the intended motions for those articles. And it only works obviously if they are articles that are not very controversial and that would not generate any discussion anyway. And so, if we decide to do this, I will definitely get you some more information about what the different parameters are that different towns use for these kinds of things. But there is a certain amount of leeway.
So there'd be a set of articles for the annual town meeting and another set of articles for the special town meeting, correct?
Right. Okay, so for the special town meeting, the articles that seem to be amenable to this treatment would be 5, 6, 7, 8, and 10.
5, 6, 7, 8, and 10, Casey?
Yes.
Thank you. Let's see.
And for the annual town meeting,
Hang on one second. I want to get my papers. Okay.
for the annual town meeting, 3, 4, 7, 8, 10, 11. I had 15, but you just got rid of that one, so that's nice. And 26.
I think 3 probably wants to come off. Believe it or not.
What?
Believe it or not, 3 may want to come off.
Oh, okay, well, that's fine.
Yeah.
We figured we were going to kill that joke this year.
I would just ask about 26, because we have new things there. Is that like we didn't have the electric vehicle charging fund and so forth. The fact that there's new stuff in there, does that affect things or?
No, I mean, if somebody thinks that they would like to discuss that because it's new, that would be an obvious one to take off the consent agenda. Or just decide, I mean, this is very preliminary.
Right.
So if, I mean, and there's no reason why we have to put anything on there really, but this is just a way, it would save us some time because what have I got here? Like 15 articles or something that we wouldn't have to take up one by one if they worked.
Even just reading the CPA article takes like 5 minutes. Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, I went through and these are ones that to the best of my recollection, we just don't get much discussion on these articles. These are, I mean, you know, especially the ones that are sort of like the snow and ice fund where, I mean, what are you going to do? We owe the money. I mean, that at very best people stand up and say, how come we didn't budget enough? But, you know, it's totally irrelevant. We didn't. So.
I think these are good. Well, let's everybody think about them and we'll talk about it at our next meeting. We'll put it on early and get it. Maybe it'll just save some time too. Yeah.
Yeah, it does. The people who use it claim that it actually saves quite a bit of time because you don't have to go through the whole, you know, ask for the recommendation of the finance committee and all this kind of stuff. You just, you know, make one motion for the whole package.
So one question that hasn't come up has what does the FinCom think about doing that? Do we know, Angus?
I haven't talked with them about it.
So that might be something that we find out first, like mention that this might be done and see how the FinCom feels about it.
I sort of vaguely remember, I'm really vaguely remembering this though, so don't stick me with it in the long term, but some kind of a rule of thumb that at least one town had, that they would only put articles on a consent agenda if the selectmen and FinCom agreed on the recommendation.
That would make sense. Yeah, okay.
Like I said, there are all kinds of different approaches and ways of doing it, rules. Another thing that gets asked is, what about the quantity of vote? So if there's something in the group that requires a 2/3 vote, then clearly the whole thing would require a 2/3 vote.
I don't think we want to do that. We don't want to lump those kinds of things together, I would say.
Well, there's no reason why not to. You just have to say that the whole thing requires a 2/3 vote. I mean,
that could be a problem in that some of the agenda items that you put out there, the very small ones on the special town meeting, are about deficit spendings, which require a 9/10 vote.
If it's a previous year. And I don't.
That's what it is.
Yeah. Well, are they all previous years?
Yeah.
Because I think it was you who told me that as long as the money had been appropriated, just not.
Yeah, but this is the problem. Is they overspent. If the money had been appropriated and there was money left there, then it only requires a majority vote. But if you overspent the money,
are they all that way?
I believe that those are the one about the
article that
overspending that they have, and there's just cleanup stuff.
Are they? But are all of the ones that?
There's just two of them, I think.
So just take those two off then.
Yeah.
If that's a problem, or you could lump those two together and say that one's a 9/10 vote. You can have more than one
Yeah.
consent agenda for per meeting. So that allows you to put together things that are related.
Mhm.
So, if you wanted to have two consent agendas that covered different groupings of logical groupings of articles, you could do that. So, food for thought.
No, it's good. We'll put our thoughts together on these and discuss it next time. And I think maybe Angus can, when he goes to the FinCom meeting, and find out if they're completely against the idea and say, this is going usurping our recommendations, and maybe we don't do it. But
well, I mean,
I think they would want to get the meeting going too.
They can't tell us that we can't do it, but they could.
Right.
They could say just object to everyone. Just do it that way.
Right.
Right.
It would be very easy for them if they just told us beforehand that they didn't want to do it. It would only take one person, or however, whatever the threshold we defined, at
Right.
the FinCom to stop it.
Yeah, and I mean,
Yeah.
And
that would be their right, So,
but to set up an adversarial situation is not particularly wise thing to do. I mean, if you already know that they're going to do that, why do it?
right.
I mean, we'll just stay there all day. I mean, it's just.
Yeah.
That's why we find out ahead of time. Yeah. Okay, that's good.
Okay.
Thanks, Casey.
Great. Yeah. Thanks a lot.
One other thing about the annual town meeting, did we want to put Article 9 before Article 2?
Yeah, that was the one, Mike, that you'd mentioned to me that I couldn't remember what you'd mentioned, but
Is that the annual?
yeah, the issue,
Annual.
Casey, is that, if we appropriate funds from the school stabilization, those funds don't then need to be included in the operating budget for the school debt.
Right.
High school. So, yeah.
As far as I know, Article 2 is just Article 2 because it's always been Article 2. I don't see any reason why you can't put Article 9 in front of it.
It's usually Article 3, actually.
Yeah, but I mean, in a lot of towns, they just draw the articles out of a hat and take, there's no article, there's no order specified when you get to the meeting. So,
but the point is that before we vote the budget for the school, we need to know that the money's being taken out of the stabilization.
Makes perfectly good sense to me, and it's your warrant, so you can do what you want with it. But unless you have some reason to say, well, tradition says we've always done it, I would go ahead and do it. I mean, this is an unusual situation. So, it's not like you're just out of the blue deciding to change make a change. Perish the thought.
Could it be taken out of order, even if it appears in the order that's printed?
I don't want to go there, Angus, because then we run into these situations where we have everybody who wants to come for their one article and then vote on it and leave. And, so I'm never, ever going to voluntarily take something out of order. Now,
just because it's under a different heading of appropriations versus general government, I was just trying to get around that. I think that's just I
think that those categorizations,
Angus, that's you being compulsive.
Those categorizations are yours. I mean, there's no reason why why the warrant has to be set up in categories. It can be it can be random. It can be whatever you want. Which is not to say that, somebody can't move, take an article out of order, and then we get into a real mess over it. And I'd just rather not go there.
Yeah, you don't want to set that precedent.
All right, well, Mike's right. So one way or the other, we'll figure out a way to get that school stabilization taken up prior to the operating budget.
Okay.
I think your reason for wanting to do it is perfectly rational and clear, and I can't imagine anybody would object to it.
Yeah, I think it's almost necessary, quite honestly.
And actually, the FinCom already favorably recommended that article anyway. So at least so far, everyone's in agreement with the amount.
Good.
Before we move on, while we all have the annual town meeting warrant handy, I just had a couple of hopefully simple questions. Casey, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Were you all done?
Yeah, I was.
Okay, great, thanks. So Article 23, the disposal of waste bylaw. It's not clear to me, where is the fine structure, or at what point, or where, or by whom is a fine structure defined? Is that?
So the complete proposed bylaw, which is the same one that was brought forward last spring, but then just not taken up because of COVID, was in the appendix of last year's FinCom booklet.
Okay.
And it include that in a packet 1 or 2 meetings ago. So it would be in one of your packets, Rick, from a week, 2 or 4 weeks ago.
Okay.
And it would be the same, it would appear in the appendix of the FinCom booklet.
Okay, Archie, is it still $10,000?
Yes. Or payable in Bitcoin. Or
better.
Another word that has IT in it.
Ooh. Okay, moving on. My other question is in Article 26. Anywhere there, should it say that that's the limit is an annual limit? This is really picky, but I was just reading it over and I was trying to figure out if that made a difference or not.
It doesn't really make a difference, Rick. It's a number. And under the Municipal Modernization Act, the Board of Selectmen during mid-year, or I should say the Select Board, during mid-year can raise the amount. So you put an amount in, which you expect. If you don't get as much, well, you can't spend anything you don't get because it's a revolving fund. So if you put in 40,000, but you only collect 30,000, that's all you can spend.
Okay.
If you collected more than 40,000 and you wish to spend it, then there is a process by which the Select Board can authorize an increase in that revolving fund.
So the Select Board can do that unilaterally as
right.
All right.
Yes.
Okay. Thanks.
One other point that I don't think you need to discuss here is that, but I believe we still have the right to reduce the quorum. And so I wouldn't, want anything now, but it might be something you might want to think about for a future meeting.
How far in advance do we have to do that?
You can do it after even the posting of the warrant, so it's you could do it in May.
Something like this. It's very short. Very, very close to the actual meeting.
Yeah.
Within the 7-day forecast?
Yeah, within a 7-day forecast.
Interestingly enough, I'll just mention this in one of the moderator feed discussions. one of the other moderators said, do not make a rain date because you never know whether it might just rain on the rain date. And the moderator has the right to just postpone the meeting right then and there and say, nope, meetings because of the legislation.
Oh.
So you can just, so if it's forecast to rain for 3 days straight, you can just postpone the meeting until better weather is forecast. But we did use the rain date last year.
No. No, we didn't.
I think in the fall, wasn't it? In the fall that we did.
Oh, the fall. I mean, I was,
Yeah. But the reason he said this was because if you make a rain date, then there's all this question of, well, who's going to make the call that we need to postpone? Now, we didn't have that problem. You all just called me and I said, yeah, obviously postpone it to the rain date. But I guess in some places they've had problems with who gets to make that call. Whereas
it's pretty sure the moderator at that point.
Yeah. But
I agree with Casey on this totally, because once that's published as a rain date, it kind of triggers the question that morning, or that once the forecast comes out leading up to it, that you get all kinds of questions about, is it a rain date? And whereas if you don't publish it, there's nothing that prevents the moderator that day from declaring the rain date.
Yeah. The only problem with that is if all these people show up and are standing there in the rain, which is not likely to happen, but it could. Well, we didn't have any problem with quora in either of our meetings last year. We had more than we needed for the regular quorum for both meetings.
I'm just throwing it out there. I mean, I agree with you.
I still think it's a good, in this situation, it's a good safety measure to have it. Why not? Yeah.
I don't disagree, but
yeah.
In fact, that was the experience, I think, of most towns. A lot of towns did limit their quorum, some drastically, and they had more people show up than usual. I guess everybody was afraid that the ones that went would wreak havoc.
I think people showed up too, just because of the novelty.
Yeah. Well, there were some interesting meetings, drive-in meetings where people sat in their cars and listened to the radio, and various other approaches to how to do this.
Okay, great.
Okay, thanks, Casey.
Bye.
Okay, we have minutes from February 4th, February 19th, and March 18th of 2019. Minutes from January 19th of 2021, February 22nd, 2021, and March 1st, 2021. Let's do the 2021 minutes first.
Should you wait on the others until Glenn's here, since?
Right.
Yeah.
So we'll make a motion to approve the January, February, and March 3 sets of minutes in 2021. I make a motion to approve those as presented.
I'll second.
Do you have a comment, Rick?
I do. I have to find it. I have a very cryptic note. I got to find it so I can figure out what I meant. It's on the 119:21 minutes, page 102. Oh, I guess it's yeah, okay. Actually, it's not a question. It's a question like, what did we do with that? But it isn't a question of whether or not it was correct in the minutes. So yeah, And I'm good with everything. I have no other comment.
Okay. For the comment, hearing no further comment, Archibald, aye.
Parker, aye.
Okay.
Okay, now town manager updates.
Okay, so
Just real quick question. Because seeing as I did have that note, it was on from the 119 minutes. We had as a follow-up meeting assignment, we were going to talk at some point about mill pond dredging and management, and I don't think we've done that. I'm just curious if
we did. Yeah, no, I circulated hundreds of pages of documents and we talked about.
Yeah.
And Wayne was here.
I got like one sentence out of reading like 100 pages.
I remember talking
worth
about.
of
I don't
material.
remember coming up with a conclusion as to how we were going to deal with it. Okay, I'll talk with you, Angus.
Okay, yeah, I wasn't aware that was still a loose end. I mean, we did what we said we were going to do, so we can talk about it more.
Okay.
No.
It must have been
Wayne had exactly the same comment that I did. Like he couldn't believe he read so much stuff and got so little out of it.
I mean, I was cleaning the catch basins, which they already did. That was the big takeaway.
Yeah.
But anyhow, yeah, it was unfortunate that Glenn wasn't there because he was the one who requested it on the agenda. So I do think, we'd be happy to have it on again, but I would want to know why, like what are we hoping to get out of? Because I just don't want to drag Wayne to meetings
that's fine. Well,
that are not productive.
Don't worry about it now. I'll figure out. I'll get my thoughts together on it. I just happened to be down there the other day, and it got me thinking, looking at some stuff.
Okay, so on to the updates, FY22 budget process and FinCom meeting schedule. As you see in the memo, the upcoming meetings are this Thursday, the 1st, next Monday, April 5th, and then the following Tuesday, April 13th. So we'll be posting an agenda tomorrow for Thursday's meeting and finalizing the date for all of the sections of the budget review. And you have a list of those that they've already taken up. Next item, the soldiers and sailors. I included some email discussion in there, but the big milestone is the continued planning board hearing next Tuesday, and we think that's going to go smoothly. I think everyone's well prepared for it, and there's a meeting on site this Wednesday with the direct abutter that Wayne will be part of, along with a landscape architect and the architect. So hopefully that'll get that hearing process closed so we can get the designers back on track with the calendar.
I'm going to be actually joining them on Wednesday.
Okay. The next item M, we did issue an RFQ last week for affordable housing consulting services with the deadline of 2 weeks from today, April 12th. So we sent that out to a number of vendors, and I think that's going to be a big help. Actually, just today I got contacted by one of the condo associations looking for advice on homeowners association fees and how those are set for the affordable units, and how are capital improvements handled within the condo association. And while I was able to get a response, we're going to be just a lot better off having a consultant on board who can devote the time to this, because as you know, for each one of these units, there's hundreds of pages of paper, and it's just it's very specialized. So that's on track. Leah and Mike have been really helpful with that. Next item, we did have the power outage Friday for National Grid to come install the new transformer. They did not, however, install a meter, so that is not yet active service. They were here twice again today, but still no meter. So once the electricity is metered there, then we can activate the charging stations. Hopefully that'll be this week, but it depends on when National Grid finishes up their piece of it. So once those EV charging stations are fully online, we'll post a news and announcement and a website, a Facebook notice, so people know that that's a resource. And I did talk to ChargePoint today. I told them that we are going to want those to show up on the ChargePoint maps. We made the decision not to do that with the Page School because it was a school, but I think for the town offices, it's personally, I think that's totally fine to have it as show up on the regional maps. Or next item, the Middle Street Bridge hearing continues. We did go ahead and authorize the change order for the design services related to the addition of the stormwater treatment structures into the design. And we corresponded last week with MassWorks because we had that's going to shift some of the money basically out of the construction budget and into the design budget. And MassWorks seemed to be okay with that. We just submitted the quarterly report today. So, we'll get official approval to make that change. But their initial response was favorable. So hopefully the Concom, process, both here and in Newburyport will, wrap up fairly soon so that project can go forward. Next item on the playground, we got bids back last Monday was the deadline for responses to the RFQ on the playground. So we got 3 submittals, and Wayne and Mike have sketched out, I think, a really good process to go through selection. I haven't personally had a chance to look at the submittals yet, but I certainly plan to go through them and be part of that process. And there will be opportunity for public involvement in the vendor selection as well. And once a vendor is selected, then there will be additional input as we finalize the design for the playground. And then finally, just other updates. I just included a number of recent items that weren't agended, but just to keep you up to date on some of the things going forward with the efforts to get funding for the pedestrian crossing beacons on Main Street. There's an upcoming public hearing with the Board of Health on the changes to method of trash collection. And I know that's something that's been of interest to the board. The next item after that is we're still working to get technical assistance from Merrimack Valley Planning Commission on the stormwater bylaw. We're hoping that if they help us, that we might be able to withdraw or not go forward with the article proposing consultant funding for the bylaw, but it's too soon to know. That's why we included that article on the warrant, because we may need to go to a consultant, but if MVPC can help us, we might be able to do it without cost to the taxpayer. That would obviously be the preference. Then I included Park and Rec Commission is really right in the thick of a very, very serious effort to look at the field structure and field usage. So they had a meeting Thursday night, and they're going to continue working on that. I just wanted to make you aware of that because I think it's great that they're tackling it. It's a tough set of issues, and it hasn't been totally clear for a number of years kind of how or why that's set up. So it's good that they're going through that in a methodical way.
Angus, can I ask you about? I tried to follow that, and I have to say I couldn't. So does what they're doing not make sense, but I don't know. I just couldn't follow the email trail and this group was being charged, this group was not being charged. I couldn't get it all.
I felt that way for a long time, and I still am not totally clear on the details, but I can tell you one of the big challenges is that some of the groups, over the years, have invested their own time and resources, and in often cases, including contracting with, vendors. So like paying out real money, thousands of dollars of money, that they as a user group have invested in keeping the fields in good shape. And so the Park and Rec Commission, in looking at user group fees, they want to take into account the fact that some groups traditionally have made, whether in kind or in some cases direct financial support to keep the fields in good shape. And so they want to take that into account so that those groups are not paying the same fee structure that other groups are.
Past history included or not included?
No, not included, just going forward.
Okay.
So if there's a group that's already spending thousands of dollars a year at the beginning of the season to get the fields in shape, I think the Park and Rec Commission feels that there ought to be consideration for that and how the fees are structured. But an alternative to that would be that the town then takes on and does all of that work, and the fees are apportioned, accordingly. And there's at least one member of the commission who's suggested maybe that's how it ought to be. But that would be a pretty radical departure from how it's been in the past, because the town hasn't, some of the services, early season services haven't been contracted by the town, and those haven't been vendors that the town's been working on. So there's a lot that's been informal, and the commission's trying to get a handle on who has done what over the years, and then going forward, how do they want to do it? And I don't think it's all going to get worked out this season because there's just too many moving parts. So I'm just glad that they're working on it, and because it's something that's been kind of outside of my direct purview, but I become aware of it when people are, feel that it's not, that it's not clear. They don't understand who's charged what and why. So at least the commission's kind of put that on the table.
People the groups that were charged, did they actually even pay it?
Well, that's a whole other issue. Is there's been, at least in, well, I would say, it's not been clear, like the relationship between Park and Rec that's imposing these fines or fees and the collections, and who's actually receiving the money and making sure that, people are paying, what they're charged. There hasn't been as direct a relationship. I'm talking about going back years. But that's, even today, like that's not something the treasurer collector's doing. It's not really clear. It's like who on staff, because there's not actually anyone on staff with any direct responsibility for Parks and Rec, other than in a very limited way with like the facility use form. So I think going forward, that's going to need to change because I just don't think you can run, an operation like that entirely based on volunteer work. I think there is a point at which someone on the payroll actually has to be involved and accountable for some of this. And that's part of the shift that's going on right now.
Yeah, is that going to, if with time that goes through the treasurer collector, in terms of collecting the money, and then goes into a revolving fund, is that, how's that going to affect existing available bandwidth?
Well, that's already happening. I mean, it's all because the monies are coming in and they're already receipted to a revolving fund. It's just, is anyone like tracking that? And I'm going back years because I've been told anecdotally that some years, some people paid, some people didn't. And the elected commission was the one who was like ostensibly tracking that, but there was nobody in the finance office or in the, selectman's office, nobody on staff who was like, because normally, you would budget those revenues and you would then when they come in, there'd be a record that X entity was owed X amount and they paid it. But if no one on staff is even aware who's being charged what,
Yeah.
like there's nobody who's on staff anyway, and I'm not saying the commission wasn't doing that, but it wasn't clear. So they're trying to make it clear. And I think part of that is going to involve, making it clear who's actually receiving the monies. Is there a due date for the monies? And if they're not paid, what's the penalty? These are all things that there's not anything been written down. I mean, that's the thing you need to keep in mind. There's not a piece of paper out there that sets out like a fee schedule, and that's what they're working towards. So they're kind of starting from a very informal place and trying to kind of make it more clear and formal.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh, I think it's good. I just had a hard time following it.
Yeah, and that's partly, I mean, as you can see, a lot of this came in like Friday, so I just kind of was closing out the packet, so I dropped it in at the end, just so you'd have a sense of what's going on, not with the expectation that, you'd take any action. It's a big deal, and you ought to be aware that it's being talked about.
Anything else?
Not for me.
Any future agenda items, Rick?
No, nothing for me.
Okay.
I had just jotted down a couple tonight. One was the town meeting quorum question. And then also, we ought to talk about the Memorial Day parade, I think, at the next meeting.
That's true. And our other our rental contract, we no panic about it, but we do want to, while we have time, it's always better to get something. If you could just contact them and see, are they going to be wanting to do it in the future even? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Good.
Should also point out that we've got the Children's Castle lease back signed and it's all finished.
Great.
Good. I forgot to mention it when we were talking about the warrant article. So is it official that the fire truck is going to be put on hold till the next year for a double thing? Yeah.
It is official, but I haven't yet had the time to write that up and notify Capital Committee. I learned about that on Friday. The Board of Fire Engineers met Thursday night, and they did decide to hold off on the $500,000 truck purchase for next year. So I got to write that up and send that around to Capital Committee.
Okay.
But they're going to investigate a combined tanker pumper that would be more like $700,000 or $800,000, but could be in lieu of two separate vehicles that are about $500,000 apiece. So I think that's a good decision.
Yeah.
Great.
Okay. Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you all. Good night.
Night,
Thank
everyone.
you.